Oggetti Socievoli.
Oggetti Socievoli presenta.
A Conversation With is hosted by Prisca Arosio.
My name is Yasaman Esmaili. I am an architect and educator and also an independent researcher. And I am based in Boston and Tehran. I'm originally from Tehran, Iran, and I have worked in different parts of the world. And my practice is also really about exploring how, by working with the community and looking into traditional techniques and how things have been done for hundreds or thousands of years, we can bring some of that to the contemporary way of living and the practice of architecture.
I invited you today because you did this project which is called Color My Home. If you could tell me a little bit about Color My Home, which I thought it was quite interesting and also relevant to what we have been doing with our project Sociable Objects.
So Color My Home initiative is a project that I started with Palestinian architect Rania, Qawasma, and really our goal was to find a way for people, mainly children, who have been through the experience of immigration, or mainly actually the experience of becoming a refugee, how we could find a way to introduce architectural thinking to them and have kind of like educational architectural workshops in which they can express their idea of home and a home that has been moving, right? So kind of thinking about what that brings to their minds, about the experiences that they have from their past homes and what they see today and what do they see for the future. And so this is how really the initiative has started, and we had several workshops in Seattle, Washington, and then kind of saw that in the workshops where the parents were part of it as well, they also wanted to contribute, and they were so interested to do kind of similar activities that we were doing with the children. So it really grew out of just being with the children. And also we started to working with people from other parts of the world as well. For example, right now I'm working with several groups of students in Iran doing similar type of activities about home. And at the moment, it's not just about a house that moves, meaning it moves from one part of the world to the other part, but also about any kind of nostalgic feeling that we have towards house, right? So it's kind of like the immigration is always happening in different stages, even if you're not changing your location in terms of geography. The way that the workshops are held, so it's kind of like we do different activities with whoever is participating that helps them think in maybe a more kind of abstract way about their feelings about their house or what they remember. We do collages, 2D and 3D collages. They write poems, they record sounds, thinking about their past, their kind of like where they are at the moment. And then they start imagining the future and do similar types of activities.
So what's interesting is that you are giving inputs for them to think about the home, and you give them kind of like a sense of awareness or a sense of rethinking, but with more an architectural thinking behind.
Yes, so it's really about maybe bringing attention to the meaning of home, the spaces that is around us. So it's like something that everybody has been experiencing, but then it's kind of like with bringing the aspect of architectural thinking to it, or making them aware of the fact that this is architecture. For most people, when you talk to them about the meaning of architecture, they just think about architects, big buildings, right? So kind of like maybe shifting that idea about what architecture is in everybody's mind, that it's really about the spaces that you are in every day and you will be in every day for the rest of your lives.
And did you notice any change in the way the kids approached the home during this last workshop, that it was during COVID, and the one that you did before?
So since COVID has started, we have been shifting it to an online version, kind of like an online studio especially, with the kids in Iran. They have been in lockdown for kind of the whole 2 years and everything is online. So the online format is not very fortunate, but I think the fact that they could actually go around and make things and listen to their environment, I think that was something that they really connected well with. It's multiple workshop. It's kind of like a 6-week thing that happens, 2 hours per week. It has 2 stages. One stage is a collage about the past and today together, because we found out that we started by doing collages about the past, today, and the future, but we found out that they really, in the way they think today and the past, is mixed. So the first part, which happens in the first 2 or 3 weeks, because the first week is just introduction, and then they go and work, and then they come back, and then they go and record the voices, and they come back. So that's what they do at first. And then for the second part, together, they have discussions about the future. And based on the result of the discussion, they come up with ideas of who is going to build what part of that future, in a collage format. So it's also about how they can imagine that tolerance in the future as well.
How did you come up with the idea of sound?
Again, because maybe it's about how we can reflect what we feel in the space and how we can then imagine what we will feel in the space in the future. Feelings, I think it's about what we see, it's about what we touch, what we hear. 2D or 3D collage is mainly about what we see, but bringing the aspect of sound, it makes just the experience of the space more powerful, kind of like enable participants think in a variety of ways about the space.
And I think your project, Color My Home, also goes back a little bit to the social and cultural aspect of the home. What did you discover along the way of working in this aspect, from the old social cultural to a new social culture? So how can they approach that in a much easier way?
Yeah, so I think, more than anything, when they participate in a project, Color My Home workshop, it's really like just a burst of feeling, right? So they just have accumulated so much feelings in them because of the aspect of moving from such a different environment culturally and socially, and coming to a place that maybe they really can't recall or can't really bring it into everyday conversations, right? So if they're going to school, for example, in the US, like they came from Afghanistan, in all the activities that they do every day, nothing is really related to their past, right? So they have to completely adjust to a very, very new setting. Kind of like you need to close the doors to everything that is coming from. I think there becomes a disconnect between what was there and what's here. Participating in a project like Color My Home is about opening that door and letting it out and maybe letting it blend and see what comes out of that blending, right? So if it kind of goes, for example, doing activities like this, that you start with such activities before you design a community center, for example, for immigrants, or before you design a housing project that maybe they're going to be in that house. If you open that door, there might come things that's not about putting some types of decorations, right? It's maybe about creating a canvas where they can explore different aspects of themselves, right? Not be kind of completely defined by a new type of a structure that they're placed in, and it's only about this one place that they're in right now. So how there can be more flexibility.
What you learn from this project, which is Color My Home, and how you also apply this in your architecture project.
So, what I have been learning a lot, and I think is very useful, is how these types of process of ideation applies really to every kind of project and whoever you're working with. So as an architect, it's not really about me just coming up with new ideas. It's about how I can enable people to maybe come up with their ideas and then find ways to incorporate those ideas in any projects that I'm working on.
It's a process of learning also of how you as an architect can put yourself into an imbalance somehow to keep to the person in front of you something that is fitting them and not fitting you.
when we look at much older examples of architecture, I think because there was enough time to really develop every corner, every detail, really thinking about what's the use of it or how does it reflect itself in everyday's life. That's why maybe we see such feeling of coherence when we visit those types of architecture. So everything is very well integrated, but how we can become insiders and not outsiders in the way that we approach design process. And the challenge is how we kind of create that interaction with people who are going to use the spaces or who are going to have, any relationship with the spaces.
How do you think the housing approach and the architecture field will change after COVID?
It has already kind of even started to change, not only just about the place of living, I think because the way we work has changed, meaning that we have learned that there are other possibilities. We knew it before, but it wasn't really practiced, right? So I think this force maybe, let people know that, okay, you don't have to do the model of 8 hours a day in one space that's away from your home. And that's not something that comes from the nature. It's kind of like a set thing that we have. Those are rules that we have created so they can change. And I think because of that, for sure, the way that office spaces are going to be used and are used is going to completely change. And the flexibility that it offers, if you also can work from home, I think that's going to be a big part of it. And then I think everybody maybe has started thinking more about every corner of their living spaces and the potential or what can happen there. And then the other aspect is, access to outdoor space, which again, these are not new lessons. I think we knew them, but we just take it lightly in the way that it's practiced. So I hope that, it becomes a must that all houses or any kind of living unit must have access to outdoor. There should be kind of like more flexibility offered in the way that we think about design. So I don't think it's going to be, kind of a major change. I think as human beings, we tend to forget, right? So I think as it fades away, many things that came with the shock will also fade away. But what I'm hoping is that more flexibility in the way that we design the spaces.
How were you using your living space at home and how this has changed during your lockdown experience?
Yeah, so I think I kind of mentioned it earlier that I also learned to focus more on every corner and see what's the potential because so many hours were spent at home and, it's like discovering that potential. Or maybe again, as architects, maybe we don't pay as much attention into our living spaces because sometimes it's used just as a living space, but I think this was an opportunity to thinking about the potential of every corner.
What type of value do you give to objects and how this has changed during your lockdown experience?
So I think maybe for me it didn't change because as somebody who, moved a lot to different parts of the world, to live in different parts of the world, I had learned that there are certain objects that I need to have with me to help me connect to my past or to my future. And that stayed with me during COVID as well, right? So because everything was so disconnected. I think maybe it was more of how I had more time to observe and focus and see the objects around me better, right? Maybe some of them I was neglecting or forgetting. So there was really a good time for observation.
What does sociable objects mean to you or what make you think?
It makes me think of how we connect to the world, right? So maybe it's a very general, but it really makes me think about the physical space that is around us and what we touch every day is something that connects us to what's outside and not what's inside us. Objects are part of that. And I think, a house is an object as well, right? So it's just in a different scale. So there are objects that we are in, and then there are objects that we can take and hold in our hands, or there are objects like the space that we sleep in or the bed that we sleep on. So these are all different sorts of physical objects that in layers, they connect us to the world. And during the time of COVID, because we were really limited to that smaller scale of the objects, right? Because again, we could see the city, the roads, all of those are objects as well, but they're bigger and they can expand, right? So, and maybe during the time of COVID, it became more limited and we had to be there and sit and observe and think. To me, sociable objects, maybe they could be everything that's around us and is an object because they connect us to the world.